Welcome to DEFCON 3. I'm KT McFarland. ISIS is fighting Kurdish forces in the city of Kobani, and reports are that Kobani is likely to fall today. Joining me now to talk about this and make some sense out of the bigger fight in the region is Frank Wuco. He's the Chief of Intelligence Operations, Special Operations Command Central. Thanks for joining us. What's your take on this? Kobani about to fall to ISIS?
KT, I don't think that there's anything right now to prevent that from happening. The airstrikes will sort of stop them in their tracks where they are on the ground. But if they've dispersed, scattered, withdrawn, wait till the wave of airstrikes is done. They keep pushing forward. And there's no viable ground force in the area right now to hold them back.
And so do they keep going then all the way to other regions of Kurdistan and northern Iraq?
Well, the Islamic State themselves, I mean, we get sort of hung up on what to call them,
right.
You know, ISIS, ISIL,
yeah,
whatever.
Exactly.
They call themselves the Islamic State. They do not put a geographic region on it, whether it's the Levant or Iraq and Syria. Theirs is global. So their goal is to prep the entire planet for the final judgment of God by way of jihad. This is how they think. It's not how we think. So they have no reason not to keep pushing east, west, north, south, all directions. This is a global.
The Turkish government, Turkish President Erdogan has said that he wants the United States to add combat forces to our bombing campaign, and yet somehow Turkish forces, combat forces, are not going to participate. Yet this fight is on the Turkish border. What do you make of that?
It's odd. Everybody wants it both ways. They don't want us to be the policeman of the world, but as long as we're expending our economic means and our blood and lives to keep security and stability in the region, they're fine with that too. So why not use American troops if we're willing to
yeah, they'll be happy to hold the coat while we do the fighting.
Absolutely right.
Okay, well, what about the coalition then? We've had the bombing coalition, we've had moderate Sunni states have joined that, some European states have joined that. How effective is bombing?
Bombing in and of itself it's only effective on that spot on the earth. So, if anybody has ever seen a 1,000 or 2,000 pound warhead go off, it's a pretty frightening sight to behold, or a TLAM warhead go off after it pokes itself into a building. But once the dust settles, that's it. And the rate of these strikes at somewhere between 1 and 200 strikes since this whole thing has begun is really minuscule when you think of even going back to the Gulf War of '91. There were 1,000 airstrikes, 1,000 air sorties per day during the Gulf War. So this really is a pinprick operation.
Yeah. Okay, well, then, now the president's going to the Pentagon today, only the second time he's been to the Pentagon in his presidency. Presumably he's going into what they call the tank. I was there, in fact, just 3 days ago. And he's going to get some briefings. What are they likely to tell him?
They're probably likely to give him a very realistic snapshot of what's going on the ground. That's my understanding from the folks that I talked to, that at places like Central Command, where he's met with General Austin and some of the other advisors, they haven't really pulled any punches with the president. One of the issues is that we're dealing with somebody who really prefers to see things the way he wishes they were, rather than the way they are.
What's on the ground.
So it's always a challenge trying to brief somebody who has a fixed sort of vision in his head of the way things should be, even if they're not that way.
Let me go back to Turkey for a minute. You said that they're reluctant to put any combat forces themselves, and yet, as you've just said, ISIS is going to go north, south, east, west to expand the caliphate. They're presumably on their way into Turkey. So do we see that as another potential theater in this war?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at where Kobani is, I mean, it's midway along the from east to west along the Syrian-Turkish border, that deep into Syria, and then you look at where they've gone east into Iraq. They're 60 miles away from Baghdad right now. Just in the last several weeks, there is really nothing to stop a similar momentum driving north. That would depend on what type of fight the Turkish military is willing to put up. And another factor that has to be considered, it's not the most likely possibility, but you have no idea what type of motivational effect the Islamic State fighters are going to have on Muslims in Turkey, even those who are in the military. So that's another factor that's unseen as of yet. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
What if we just walk away? The United States says, hey guys, we'll help the Kurds, we'll help Israel, but you're on your own for the rest.
That would be interesting but deadly, because there's not a force in the region right now that seems to have the will and the motivation to stand up and fight,
ISIS.
right, to ISIS. Not the Saudis. I know we're all about saying things about the Saudis and then apologizing to them a couple days later because they've gotten offended. But hey, I've spent quite a bit of time in that part of the world. By and large, just culturally within the Gulf states, just physical work alone of any type, whether it's construction work, digging a ditch, fighting, is not part of the moray of a lot of the Gulf states. So the Saudis, the UAE, the Qataris, they're not going to get Filipino and Sri Lankan third country nationals to do their fighting for them, the way they do a lot of their other heavy work. So culturally, it's going to be a huge challenge as the Islamic State pushes east and south.
Wow. Okay, well, thank you for putting that very grim sense of dose of reality into the conversation. Frank Wuco, formerly Special Operations Command Central. And that's it for DEFCON 3.